Welcome back, everybody. President Donald Trump doubling down on his campaign promise to crack down on illegal immigration. And those marching orders answered with some action. Yesterday, ICE arrested 956. That's up from 593 Friday and 286 Saturday. So deportations meeting sort of a bump over the weekend, too. Colombia refused to allow a U.S. military plane to land. On board, and you see them marching there, deported migrants. Now, in response, the president threatened a 25% tariff on Colombian goods into the United States, threatened a travel ban, and a visa reversal for Colombian government officials and allies. That threat by today looks to have worked. Look at what the White House said overnight. The government of Colombia has agreed to all of President Trump's terms, including the unrestricted acceptance of all illegal aliens from Colombia returned from the United States, including on U.S. military aircraft without limitation or delay, close quote. So we have team coverage on these developments. Lilia, Luciano in New York, Camilo, Montoya-Galvez in Washington, D.C. But let's first of all start with you, Lilia. You have reporting on arrests outside of Denver quickly before we talk about Colombia.
That's right, Reed. Well, this is one of many operations that, as you mentioned, have been happening through the weekend. The number of people arrested by ICE and other collaborating agencies through the weekend was vast, especially on Sunday. It tripled the average daily arrests under the Biden administration. All hands on deck. What we know is that there was an early morning or middle of the night, basically, raid in Denver where the DEA and HSI and ICE agents went in and arrested around 50 people. They said, according to the DEA, that the 50 people were undocumented, although we've reached out to that Denver DEA field office to get a little bit more clarity on how that investigation was carried out, whether DEA was the lead or if it was ICE who was leading that investigation. They said that drugs, weapons, and cash were seized during the operation. It seems to have been a party that was broken into by these agents, and then that they arrested these 50 people. As we've been reporting in the past, and as we know, there has been a great deal of talk in Denver, and there have been arrests in the past of people who are associated, according to the federal agency's investigations, associated with Tren de Aragua, which is a criminal gang that was initiated in Venezuela and has had activities across the United States. They are accused of running sex trafficking, drug trafficking operations. And so especially in Denver, these agencies had already been conducting investigations in the past, and we had been reporting on that as well as our affiliate in Denver. But we're trying to get a little bit more clarity from the agencies and comment about, whether this was a longer investigation. As ICE spokespeople have told me in the past, look, these first raids are not going to be just, random or at random raids. They're going to be targeted of people who are known to commit crimes. That said, there's also been reporting about quotas. And when you're talking about quotas of up to 1,200 or 1,500 people a day, that may inevitably lead to more people than those who are known or are under investigation for committing crimes other than immigration-related crimes.
All right, Lilia, and while we have you, we've got to ask you about that back and forth between President Trump and Colombian leaders. Get us up to speed on what the now element of this story is, because it looks like quite an about-face in not very much time.
Yesterday, I will tell you, Reed, I was nonstop on this, making calls and hearing from people, and people in Colombia, from the private sector to officials to local governments, were all extremely worried. It all started when President Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, said, according to Marco Rubio, the plane that was a military U.S. DOD military plane that was on its way to Colombia was already in the air, where it was a repatriation flight, was already on its way to Colombia. According to Marco Rubio, that's when President Petro said, we're not going to receive it. He said that it was because of the dignity, or in the interest of the rights and the dignity of those deportees, those Colombians. So he refused to take it. At that point, the White House, or President Trump, instructed that there would be tariffs starting at 25% and then upping them to 50% if things didn't change next week on Colombian goods. Look, you have to keep in mind that the U.S. is Colombia's most important trading partner. For the U.S., in terms of the U.S. economy, Colombian products make up around 1% of the U.S.'s trades, so it's relevant for the U.S., but it was a massive hit on Colombia. There was a great deal of concern. Then the president of Colombia went on Twitter on basically a tirade, saying all kinds of things and, accusing Trump of discrimination and a lot of other, very specific details. But then there were obviously back channel and high level negotiations and diplomatic notes that were being sent back and forth. And finally, very late last night, there was a tweet with a statement from the White House saying that despite everything that the Colombian president had said, and after the Colombian president had also threatened tariffs on U.S. goods and told the Colombian people, no worries, the government will help make Colombian products cheaper so that those U.S. products that will increase in price are not going to affect your pocket. After all of this, there was a tweet with a statement from the White House saying that the Colombian president, that Colombia agreed to all of Trump's terms, including receiving deportees from those military flights. And not only did the White House announce this, but the Colombian president retweeted it, basically agreeing that, yes, we agreed on all terms. After that, I kept watching his Twitter feed. He deleted the retweet, but, definitely made a statement very quietly with no further comment at that point that, yes, everything had been agreed on. What is the impact of this? It's a message. It truly strengthened that kind of credibility of the White House and of President Trump in the region. And I think there's a lot of concern now that things seem to have worked out so well after those threats from the White House, which included taking away the visas of Colombian officials,
right,
enhancing checks by CBP of Colombian people coming into the U.S. and of products. I mean, there was a whole list. And then at the end of the day, you see the Colombian president agreeing, and the Colombian foreign minister saying we overcame an impasse and now we will accept these deportees. It sends a message to countries around the world that, the White House is strong and that these threats work. And so we'll continue reporting on what happens and if this escalates once again, but it was quite an eventful and towards the end confusing series of exchanges there.
Right, you can pick and choose your headlines. We knew President Trump uses tariffs as a bargaining chip through the economic lens. Now we're seeing it used throughout the lens and in the context of immigration issues. Lilia, always so great to talk to you. Have a great day. Okay, so let's continue the conversation, bringing in CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. So, Camilo, let's drill down on something else you've been reporting about, and that's something called parole-based immigration programs. What are they, and how are they driving the conversation from that perspective?
Hi, Reed. According to an internal memo from the Department of Homeland Security obtained here at CBS News, we can report that immigration officials have been instructed by the Trump administration to stop allowing immigrants into the country under a policy known as parole. That legal authority allows presidents to welcome foreigners who don't have visas on humanitarian or public interest grounds. And the Biden administration really used that parole authority, Reed, at an unprecedented scale, including to discourage people from traveling to the U.S.-Mexico border by offering them a legal way to come here, again, lawfully and in a safe way. And we understand that this move by the Trump administration effectively suspends several parole programs, including a sponsorship initiative for refugees from Ukraine fleeing that Russian invasion of their homeland, and also another sponsor initiative, for Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans who are, again, sponsored by private American citizens. It also suspends the extension of parole status for Afghan evacuees who were brought here to the U.S. following the fall of Afghanistan and Kabul in 2021 and the takeover by the Taliban of that country. And so this really does underscore, Reed, that this immigration crackdown by the Trump administration is not just limited to illegal immigration, but also extends to legal forms of immigration. We should also note that the Refugee Admissions Program, another legal immigration initiative, has also been suspended by the Trump administration.
So there's also reports I want to ask you about of the Trump administration working out an asylum agreement with El Salvador. What would this mean?
That's right. Sources tell CBS News, Reed, that the country of El Salvador in Central America is working on arranging an asylum agreement with the Trump administration that would allow the U.S. to deport migrants who are not from El Salvador to that country. And so this would be known as a safe third country asylum agreement, and it would empower U.S. immigration officials, including at the U.S.-Mexico border, to essentially block people from seeking asylum in the U.S. and instead direct them to El Salvador to seek asylum there, because that country would be designated as a safe third country. And we are also told that one plan under consideration as part of this initiative would allow the U.S. actually, Reed, to deport Venezuelan gang members, suspected members of the Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang, to El Salvador to have that country detain them in that region. And of course, El Salvador over the past years has launched a massive incarceration campaign of gangs in that country. So it would be another layer to that effort. And so this is yet another attempt by the Trump administration, Reed, to really forge alliances with countries in the region to crack down on illegal immigration.
CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez, thank you so much for your time. It's good to see you, my friend.